Jane was talking a bit about giving, and let me suggest this to you. No child looks forward to Christmas. Well, no child that I know of in this country looks forward to Christmas because it is a day on which they are lucky enough to be able to give presents to others. They look forward to Christmas because it's a day, of course, that they get presents. Perhaps adults are the same, maybe we're different, I don't know. But is giving time, giving labour, giving friendship, even giving presents, a way to get happy? Is altruism good for you? And if it is, and that's why you do it, is it really altruism? And if, like me, you are cunning, selfish and calculating, can you learn how to be more caring and compassionate? To discuss all this, we're joined by a man who went from a scientific career in France to studying Buddhism in the Himalayas 40 years ago. He's the author of Happiness, A Guide to Developing Life's Most Important Skill. He's participated in studies on the effects of meditation on the brain. He's the French interpreter for the Dalai Lama. Please welcome Matthieu Ricard.
Think of what the world could be if we could just be kind to each other.
So, after this most inspiring word, I was thinking when listening to Dr. Goodall that if happiness, empathy, and some form of altruism is present in our animal brothers and sisters, then it has to be present in humans. That's comforting. As you know, the wicked world syndrome, so many people think that we are just irremediably selfish brutes, and there's nothing good that can really come out, that genuine altruism doesn't exist. So if it exists in chimpanzee, we can hopefully have a chance that it exists in human as well. So what is the link first between happiness and altruism? You could imagine that someone will pursue a goal of selfish happiness. The French writer Romain Rolland said that if selfish happiness is the only goal of your life, you still will be without any goal, because that simply doesn't work. It doesn't work for many reasons. One first is experiential. You might imagine that just taking care of your own happiness and leaving the happiness of others to themselves will be fine. But what will happen? You will be in that small bubble of self-concern. Everything will be like a storm within that sort of small glass of water. You'll only be concerned, me all the time. What is possibly pleasing me, threatening me, and all those hopes and fears will bounce in that small bubble of the ego, constantly tormenting you. So it's a miserable state of mind. And of course, because of being exclusively self-concerned, you will make the life of others miserable. All the rumination, the hopes and expectations, the fears, that will make your life terrible, and you will not be perceived as someone that is as a contribution to others. But there's another reason, is that the pursuit of selfish happiness is fundamentally at odds with reality. It will imply that we are sort of existing as autonomous entities, and we could think that I could just build my own happiness in my little autonomous self, and I'm not against others being happy, but that's not my business. I have too much to do to take care of my own happiness. The fact is that we are interdependent. So there's no such thing as autonomous entities. We only exist through and with others. If you were suspended alone in space, love, friendship, happiness would mean nothing. It's only through and with others that happiness can flourish, that suffering can be removed. So being at odds with reality, the pursuit of selfish happiness is bound to fail, is bound to hit on the wall of the way things are. Now, if you think at the opposite, the pursuit of an altruistic happiness include altruistic love, compassion, inner freedom as the core quality that constitute genuine happiness as a way of being, not as an endless succession of pleasant experience, which looks more like a recipe for exhaustion than for happiness. So this cluster of qualities, one of the foremost is precisely compassion, altruistic love, and empathy. It turns out that when you actually experience unconditional love, this is one of the most uplifting state of mind, where you feel completely in harmony with yourself, with the world, with other sentient beings. Neuroscience has shown that meditators that engage in compassion meditation, that is among all meditation states, the one that activates certain areas of the brain in the most powerful way. We could say is the most positive among all positive emotions. So on a subjective level, this is a crucial element for flourishing. Now, not only that, but as much as the pursuit of selfish happiness was at odds with reality, here compassion is attuned to reality, interdependence. If we are all in relation and connected with each other, then when I recognize deep within that definitely I don't want to suffer, I don't wake up in the morning thinking, may I suffer the whole day and if possible, my whole life. Whatever I do, take a cup of tea, take a shower, meet a friend, start a career, want to change the world, want to save the environment, I hope that something better is ahead. I'm not looking towards more suffering. And the fact that we're interconnected means that I can project myself in others' mind and see that even they are very confused, even they run toward suffering and turn their back to happiness because of ignorance, because of confusion. Yet deep within, of course, no one wants to suffer. If I recognize that, then one of the core causes or factor for altruism, which is to value others. I value the fact that I don't want to suffer, then I will start valuing the fact that others don't want to suffer as well. If I value that aspiration in others, I'll be concerned with their suffering, with their happiness, with their situation. It will matter to me. I will have the sense of shared sentience, not only share humanity, but shared with all sentient beings. I cannot dehumanize human beings, treat them like often happens in genocide, like vermin, rats, people that the world would be better without them. I cannot objectify even further or reify animals thinking they are just sausage machine or something like that. I cannot remove that value, that aspiration for life that all sentient beings have and start to value it. So that is attuned to reality, and because of that, it will be functional. It will work. So the question is, does altruism exist? Can we cultivate it on a personal level? And from there, how can we bring about a change in society? That's a huge challenge. So if we look at the challenges of our time, conceptually, it's very hard for people to, in their minds, reconcile three scales of time. The short term of the economy. Economists will tell you, this is reality. If economy goes bad, everything will go bad. And the stock market goes up and down. The new methods of, the finance world, you can do now 400 million transactions per second. That's pretty fast. And if you issue treasury bond that will mature in 150 years, no one is interested. So then there is the quality of life for all of us, for humans, for animals. Quality of life is a career, a family, a generation, a lifetime, the gross national happiness. Often we have to sacrifice a bit of that, so-called economy is such an important thing. And then there's even a greater time scale, the environment, future generation. It used to be at a scale of geological or biological eras. Now it accelerates, obviously. The problem here is that the future doesn't hurt, at least not yet. And possibly it won't hurt us, but it will hurt future generations. So that's the ultimate challenge to altruism. And it's very hard for people to think like in that way in the long term. I heard a American billionaire speaking on a very conservative American TV saying about the possible rise of the level of the ocean. He says, why should the idea that we should change the way we live now for something that might happen in 100 years, I find it absurd. Wow, that was pretty absurd, isn't it? So the problem is that they have hard time to have a conceptual framework that allows them to include those 3 timescales and link them in an intellectual way. But if you think that altruism is the magic thread that conceptually reconcile those 3 timescales, if you have more consideration for others, then naturally you will not play with the resources and the savings of people like you play at the casino at Las Vegas. No, Mr. Madoff was not that concerned with the savings of the people who trusted him. If you have more concern for the quality of life, then you will be doing what is necessary so that the conditions at work, in the social life, are more favorable for your flourishing, for fulfilling your aspirations in life, for giving freedom and happiness and so forth. If you are more concerned and considerate for future generations, you are not going to destroy the very planet they will inherit. So that allows conceptually to link all those things. So how then can we make people having more consideration for others? So first of all, genuine benevolence, altruistic mind has to exist. And myself, I was so shocked and surprised when I began investigating that question to see that there were very influential movements of thoughts among philosophers, psychologists, economists, to the idea that we can only be motivated by self-concern. Even we behave altruistically or seemingly altruistically, there's always a selfish motive behind. Of course, it does exist from time, often. Self-interest, we hope some reward in the short term or the long term. We are altruistic because of our name or reputation, because we expect something, whether it's physical or moral, in return, because we might feel guilt if we are not behave like that. But then, there are many clearly occasions where people anonymously will do an act of generosity, of love, with no expectation in return. Nobody's there to praise them. Nobody will blame them if they don't do it. But those theorists of selfishness have not given up. They say, oh, you do that because of the warm glow that comes out of that, so you're just so selfish. So now, there was a story a few years ago of someone in the subway in New York. He was there with his 2 daughters, and the man had an epileptic fit and fell on the platform. So he helped him recover. The man got up and stumbled and fell on the track. The train was coming. So that man with his 2 daughters thought, if he sits there, he's going to be killed. He saw that if he could lie down, he might survive. So he jumped and crouched on him, helped him, put him flat down, and it barely went under the train. Now, would you say that this guy, when he jumped, he thought, I'm going to feel so good when this is over? But they have not given up yet. If you interview these kind of heroes, they say, oh, how could they have done otherwise? There was no choice. You had no choice, therefore it's not altruistic. You didn't think about it. But what does that mean? Something that is obvious. If you see a child drawing, of course you have a choice, but the choice is so obvious for someone that he will give a hand. It's not that you have no choice, it's that the choice comes in a split second. It is the expression of what you are within. That person was so genuinely like that he, of course, for him it was obvious. But when it comes to people who rescued others during genocide, during persecution, in Rwanda, in Bosnia, everywhere, especially it was studied during the Nazi era, where thousands of people put at risk themselves, their own family, for saving people who were ethnically different, different religion. They could not expect anything. So much for the selfish genes. They were totally dedicated, one-pointedly committed. There was expecting nothing in return. People usually around them would not even praise them. They had to hide that. Sometimes they didn't say to anyone for 20 years until those survivors found them back and honored them. It was very hard to find any selfish motivation within that. So these and other studies, like by the American psychologist Daniel Batson, have shown that yes, fortunately, genuine altruism does exist. And it's good news, because if we were, irremediably selfish, there'll be no point to try to enhance that in ourselves, to teach that in education, be more cooperative, be more altruistic. We'll be trying like washing a piece of charcoal for 100 years, and you won't get shining like gold. But if there's a potential, then we can enhance it. So the question is, maybe we're altruistic, but look at the mess. So maybe that didn't help so much. So we have to enhance it some way and then bring it a cultural change. So it has to begin with personal transformation. You cannot impose it from the top. It has to start with oneself, with your family, with the village, with the community, and then slowly there can be a tipping point. So is personal change possible? And that's where the notion of mind training, the Eastern word of meditation, means to cultivate a quality, to become more familiar with something. And in fact, yes, we do have moments of unconditional love for someone who is very dear to us, a child, an animal, a parent, a companion, someone we heard of. We feel just, but only may that person be happy, be safe, be healthy, flourish in life. But those moments come and go, and other chain of thoughts come and replace them. We don't sit as we go on this bicycle in the morning in our apartment that goes nowhere, not even in the kitchen, to get more fit. There's no compassion gymnasium. No, our friend Paul Ekman said we should have compassion gymnasium all over the place. Every block should have an altruistic gymnasium where we train in compassion. But instead of just having these moments, fleeting moments, if you were to sit for 20 minutes, just as you do physical fitness, and bring that unconditional love to your mind and nourish it. If it declines, revive it. And then let it fill your mental landscape for 20 minutes. For sure, day after day, that will enhance your natural disposition towards benevolence and altruism. And that's a fact of experience for contemplative who spend a lot of time trying to refine and train their attention, their mindfulness, their vigilance, and use that then to enhance and cultivate those basic human qualities, foremost among which are altruism and compassion. And neuroscience, as I will briefly show in a few moments, also shows that changed the way your brain functions, that changed your physiology, that it might even change the expression of your genes. So neuroplasticity, the way the brain changes, respond to any training of the mind. If you learn to play the piano, after a while, or the violin, the area in the brain that has to do with the movement of the finger will be enhanced and reinforced, and sometimes even structurally bigger. It's possible that some genes will be expressed that was not expressed before. So that's fine. That's known about many skills like juggling, or taxi drivers in London who memorize 15,000 streets, the area of the brain that about topology is enhanced. But what about if you could do that for basic quality like well-being, altruism, compassion, focused attention? Wouldn't it be wonderful? So that seems what happened if you use meditation for that. And that seems also what happened in any kind of mind training. So let's assume that this is a possibility. So now how could you transfer that to a change of culture? What I mentioned in the beginning, those 3 time scale, we need to sort of link them. We need to find a way. So of course it is very difficult. Some of our colleagues will speak about evolutionary aspect of altruism, selfishness. But a recent theory about evolution of culture, there are no new thinkings that it would be conceivable that a group of altruist people who connect with each other would have an advantage altogether to a group of selfish people. You know, one-to-one, of course, these altruist people have little chance. But if altruists cooperate, you can see that the selfish will not cooperate. They'll keep on kicking each other's leg. So maybe there's a chance that way. So that's, I think, the challenge of our times. And that's, I think, if we speak of the triple index or the triple bottom line of the economy in one way, and then the index of the gross national happiness and the index on the environment, and then we have something to look after. And just a small note to follow on Jane Goodall's talk about animals. If we want a more altruistic society, we cannot have this institutionalized selfishness toward animals. 150 billion terrestrial animals are just killed every year for our consumption. 1.5 trillion ocean animals. In the United States and modern states, 99% of those are raised in industrial farms. They live 1/60th of their life expectancy in terrible condition. All that because we consider that their life has no more value than a piece of meat. So that's, Gandhi said that we can judge a civilization to the way they treat animals. Not simply because of animal rights and so forth. They are sentient beings. They don't want to suffer. Unless we value that, it's very hard. If we don't have compassion for a certain group of sentient beings, it will be very hard to have genuine, unconditional compassion for humanity as well. So I just want to continue with a little bit of the science research. So the idea was to study, to show the possibility of change. And that applies to altruism and compassion, but also to any skills like attention. My friend Alan Wallace had a workshop yesterday on the attention revolution. There's something that can be trained, as he explained, not just like something that you have or not. So the idea first was study meditators who have done many hours of meditation, between 10,000 to 50,000 hours. Because if we find something, we are bound to find it in those guys. If we don't, there's no point studying someone who did 1 week of meditation, isn't it? So first we brought meditators from those beautiful places. That's what I'm lucky to see from my hermitage at breakfast. This place, perfect for meditation. No supermarket, no movie halls. There's nothing else to do but meditation. So that's a good place in Bhutan. That's again what I see at breakfast from my hermitage. Well, here are great teachers. We didn't want to bring them to the lab. Here Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, who was one of His Holiness' dear teacher. They spent 30 years in retreat training their mind. Kangyu Rinpoche, my first teacher. And someone here who's just coming out of 6 years of retreat. He looks so happy, isn't it? The question is he so happy because at last he's coming out of 6 years of retreat, or because he did 6 years retreat? And I know him very well, and I can tell you he's happy all the time. Now, 10,000 miles from there in Madison, Wisconsin, at Richard Davidson's lab with 256 electrodes. So, measure change in the brain through electrocephalogram that measure very, very fast changes, up to 1,000 of a second, but not so clear for the exact in place in the brain in 3 dimensions. So sometimes we read in the press as the study with Tibetan Buddhist monks. Now, first of all, among experienced meditators, there was as many men and women, as many layperson and monastic. This is a British doctor who did 10 years retreat. MRI, it would be very nice if you could meditate like that, but unfortunately we have to lie down for 2 hours, not moving a fraction of a centimeter. Anyway, fMRI, here after 2.5 hours, and Richard Davidson is very glad that the meditator survived. So, MRI allows to have a very clear localization of what happens in the brain, but the time resolution is less good, few seconds. Now, very briefly, just to show you, to give you a taste of what the experienced meditator, how they differ from untrained people. Here with electroencephalogram, we're meditating on compassion. The bottom is untrained people at rest. Nothing happened. Red line. Then the blue line is when they meditate. Nothing happened either. That's normal, they are not trained. Now, meditators at rest, they are supposed to rest, fine. Now, when they engage in compassion meditation, you see this huge activation of the brain, especially in the gamma frequencies. Something of such a magnitude that Richard Davidson said was never recorded earlier in neuroscience. And not only one, but 20 meditators had the same pattern. If you look to brain imaging, here you see the meditator at rest. Here, when they engage in compassion, you see many areas of the brain, some linked with empathy, like the insula, are activated. The control group, at rest, in meditation, no comments. Now you say, okay, 50,000 hours in the Himalayas, good for you, but what about us? So, 3 months training, 8 weeks training, now 2 weeks training already in loving kindness meditation as compared to a good psychological method like reappraisal. Already shown in 2 weeks a much greater increase in prosocial behavior in those who have done loving kindness meditation. Now, if you look in the brain, correspondingly, there's a deactivation of a part of the brain, the amygdala, that has to do with anger, aggressivity, and fear. Even in 2 weeks, there's a change. Now, if you ask the meditators, experience one this time, can you modulate your compassion? Can you do 30%, 60%, 90% of compassion? That seems strange, isn't it? But yes, they can do that, it seems. Here you can see, when you ask them that, if you measure in the brain, you can see. So it's like such a flexibility of mind that is typical of a skill. Now, you could do that also with pain, which is something they didn't train to. They can control pain, sensation 30%, 60%, and so forth. Attention, such a thing they wouldn't think they would be trained. Here's a typical curve of attention on the attention task. People get tired. Meditator, they have a flat curve. One of them, after 45 minutes and 0 mistake out of 1,000 trials, he said, what's the problem? You want me to continue? He was ready for the whole day. So a skill is something that you do with ease and well, as opposite that when you are unskilled, you don't do it well and you get tired and so forth. So now it's coming in the general perception of the public. Why is it important? Not just to show off about the quality of experienced meditators, but because to give confidence that yes, we can train our mind, and we so vastly underestimate the power of transformation of mind. And that's our drama. We are ready to get educated for many years, to get professional skills. We know that we won't learn mathematics just by looking in the sky. How come that those fundamental qualities of mindfulness, vigilance, and compassion would just be at their optimal stage just because we want so? That doesn't make sense. So Francisco Varela was one of the first one who launched this program of cooperation between meditators and scientists. Here is one of those meetings with His Holiness. And so now for 8 weeks or 3-month study, you can already, as you see here, reduce anxiety. It improves your immune system compared to a control group of non-meditators. So no, I don't have much time to tell you about that. I just want to end with one thing, or even stem cell can be boosted in the blood. Often people ask, and I have only 1 minute I can see on the screen, it's very nice to meditate on compassion in your hermitage, but we need also to be in the world. So as here, in these wonderful conferences, you also have witnesses. So now, a bit as a witness, I will just show you briefly what we did out of compassion. Not just, again, to show off, but to see that compassion without wisdom is blind, but compassion without action is sterile. So over 10 years, we achieved 111 projects in the Himalayas. Here's a clinic in Nepal, a bamboo school with 2,500 skills, 70% girls in Nepal. We can build that for a very modest amount, and it's so wonderful. It's very ecological, it resists earthquakes. In Tibet, we built 16 clinics. We take care of the mother and child program. We have orphans, professional skill training. We build bridges, it seems necessary. Here there's a road and there's a river, but we don't know where one starts, one stops. So the driver is telling his mantra very fast. So bridges, elderly people, the happiest woman in the world, the happiest man in the world, schools, and so forth. So, thank you so much. So I think what we should take is, first, that we should not underestimate our faculty to cultivate altruistic love within ourselves, and then find out how we can bring about a more altruistic society. Thank you.
There's a 40-minute break coming up in about 25 minutes, and we will be checking to see how many of you are spending at least some of that time meditating.